Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Raj Badwar, VP Global Head of Cybersecurity and CISO, Jacobs. We are very excited to have Raj with us for a keynote presentation titled Managing the Risks of Generative AI. Welcome, Raj. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. And I'm going to go very quickly. So this is the agenda that we'll be talking about today. A quick slide about me, the abstract of the conversation. We'll talk about the risks and some techniques to manage those risks, right? And then we'll have a quick takeaway slide. There's a bunch of slides here. This is actually a 1-hour presentation, so I'm going to try to go as fast as possible, and we'll try to cover as much material as I can in the 25 minutes, and then we'll do a 5-minute Q&A after that. So with that, let's jump in. A quick bio about me. I'm the CISO at Jacobs at the moment, former CISO at Oracle, at Voya, at AIG, and I've had some leadership roles before that at BAE and Bank of America. I also have a few advisory role gigs at CSA, which is Cloud Security Alliance, at Infosys, and at Pace University. I have a few certifications, and I have written a few books and have a few patents. With that, let's jump in. So the abstract today is, in this context of the conversation, we all know what generative AI is, right? But at least the way I've defined it is that it refers to the large learning models, also known as LLMs, that are trained, with data sets that we create that can take in input requests, those data sets, as, as text, as video, as sound, right? What we call as prompts. So these prompts could be of these 3 types. And actually, these LLMs can generate output responses, which can also contain text or images or video or sound. So that's what a generative AI kind of sort of so-called, model does or application does. These technologies, like ChatGPT and Copilot and others, right, can deliver significant benefits by increasing efficiency and productivity for our businesses and for IT teams and development teams and so on and so forth, right? So lots of good is there, but there is obviously, with the good, sometimes there's a bit of a bad where these can expose organizations to significant security and privacy risks, right? And it can also increase legal liability from intellectual property violations or non-conformance with security and privacy regulations, right? So if not properly managed, there are some risks that we have to now deal with. So with the good, a little bit of the bad, and we're going to talk about what those risks are and maybe some ideas about, okay, how can we manage or mitigate those risks? With that, let's jump in. So the first risk that I want to talk about is, malware. So these tools, the Gen AI tools like ChatGPT and Copilot, right, they can be trained with source code for malware, either for experimentation purposes or by the attackers themselves. And then subsequently, these tools can be used to generate new malware strains or create, variations of existing polymorphic or metamorphic malware, which is dangerous enough, right? So that there is a risk there. The problem is that these malware strains, or variations as we call them, are difficult to detect because most of our detection technology at the moment is based on hashes, right? It's based on known indicators of compromise, on TTPs, on signatures, and these would be new, so the signatures wouldn't exist. Now, obviously, there is behavior-based detection that we'll talk about in a minute, but definitely increases the risk, right? And also, if you go, the hackers of the world, some of them are smart, they are well-educated, They are very talented and they have great development skills. Well, with this type of capability, anybody or their brother could start generating malware, right? So again, increases the threat vector for us security folks. And the other problem is that, this actually has already been what we have seen in the wild, is that these technologies have already been used to create malware, right? To exploit, for example, a vulnerability comes out today. Generally, in the past, the POCs would show up a week later. Well, now with this type of capabilities, the POCs for vulnerability exploits can come very, very, very fast. And the OEM sometimes will not have enough time to release the patches or mitigation techniques or whatever, right? So those are some of the risks in the malware category that we do face from this capability of the large learning models, LLMs. And so I think that the only solution that we have for this is to start using unsupervised machine learning, right? Like, for example, like deep learning paradigms to enable behavior-based dynamic detection of malware, so that, like it knows that even though you don't have the signature, you have never seen this before, the behavior that is exhibiting, whether it's, a binary, whether it's any kind of a TTP inside a risk or otherwise, it can, with quite a bit of certainty, say or predict that this is malicious behavior or this is malware indeed, right? So those are some of the things that we have to do. And the reality is that not all of us have the tools to do this. And not all of us have the internal teams to develop this type of capability. So obviously we are at the mercy of the vendors and they are hard at work. But this is something that we should keep in mind, is that as we renew our EDR agents or our NGAV agents, we got to make sure that the capability to detect do dynamic detection of malware is indeed there, and not based on set static signatures, which is what has been the paradigm in the past, right? So I think so that's the first one. The second one is, like these capabilities, like for example, ChatGPT or Copilot, right? They operate in your tenancy. Like for example, like Microsoft with Copilot, right? So if you have access to sensitive data and if the tool is running in your context, then it can get access to sensitive data. And the problem is a lot of these tools have not been subjected to thorough penetration testing, right? To verify that all the security controls are implemented, data loss prevention controls are implemented. And, like, for example, if a document has been tagged as sensitive, that, the intelligence should be there for it to not to be shared within, because it's not just, the fear is not just oversharing of data outside of your tenancy. The fear is that oversharing of data within your tenancy, right? Because you may have, as a user, may have access to some data that you don't want your colleague to get that access, right? If you're in HR, if you are in security, if you are in a business, you don't want certain aspects of your data to be shared within the firm. And so that's where, like those risks exist of unauthorized access or oversharing of data. The other problem is that these Gen AI tools are really known, have susceptibility to GAN attacks, which is generative adversarial networks, right? So these can be used to actually attack these models or these tools to gain authorized access. So that's a problem. So the thing that I recommend is continuous penetration testing, making sure that we test these tools, we verify that, like there aren't any gaps that exist. Also, continuous identity governance to prevent oversharing of data. So making sure that, any privilege or any access that a user in your ecosystem has is based on the principle of least privilege. Least amount of privilege they need to do get their jobs done, right? So you got to verify that. And also making sure that any kind of sensitive data that is properly tagged is protected by DLP capabilities, either at the edge or on the endpoint or on the cloud file shares or wherever else, however data is being shared. Let's make sure that we have those controls in place so that, data can be protected. And last but not the least is, we all got to start categorizing our data. And a lot of that could be done automatically with, auto classification from Microsoft. So they used to have, they used to call it Intune. I'm sorry, not Intune. They used to, call it Azure AIP, Azure Information Protection. And now they have renamed that to Microsoft Entra ID. So we should all start doing that classic categorization if possible, if you have that capability. I believe it comes with E3 and definitely comes with E5 licensing with Microsoft. And then making sure that once the data is properly categorized, you have the DLP capability to actually prevent from it being overshared with a group of people or users that don't have that capability to get access to that sensitive data, don't have the privilege, right? Something that we've all got to do. There is obviously liability from IP violations, right? So generative AI, let's be sure that it's not creating data by scratch by itself. It is providing responses and text responses, video responses, sound responses to stuff that it has learned, right? So the reality is that when it shares or generates some text for you, or video for you, or a soundbite for you, it may actually have learned it from somewhere else or from various sources. And now if it's sharing that with you, and you may have the risk of IP violation of somebody else's intellectual property, right? So Microsoft obviously has made some statements about how it would cover people from IP violations, but I feel that there is still tremendous amount of risk, especially, for example, if you ask it for a snippet of source code and it generates that for you, you don't know where that source code actually came from and whether it's copyrighted or not, right? So there is obviously sanitization layers have to be created to make sure that these risks can be mitigated. So like some firms are talking about creating IP violation detection engines, right? They can actually detect and scan the software or the document or the text or the video or the soundbite and verify that it's not going to cause any kind of a known IP violation, right? These engines obviously are as good as the source of truth. So whatever source of truth that they're going to is dynamic. It can change. So you may still have some risk there, but at least there is some attempt to mitigate that risk. The other thing is, in the security team, what we recommend is to start using a lot more software composition analysis capabilities, or SCA tools as we call them, so that we look at the composition of every library that we are actually bringing in, or source that is being generated. Because SCA tools can also some of the SCA tools can actually help, for example, determine if the component, the source code or the language, or the snippet or the script or whatever else is actually copyrighted, or it can with some amount of determination tell you if it's come from another managed source. So these are some of the things that we should think about while we have to manage the legal liability from IP violations, right? So the next one is ransomware and DDoS attacks. So as you all know, I mean, every day you will read about some kind of ransomware attack on some firm, hospitals and financial firms and manufacturing firms and government entities and so on and so forth, right? Very, very dangerous. And these, the Gen AI tools can actually generate the scripts very easily. Like, for example, it can even, it has been known to generate basic scripts from simple encryption tools like WinZip or other open source encryption tools to create an actual encryptor that can be used to launch a ransomware attack. So very, very dangerous, right? And at the hands of people that are not very skilled. Similarly, ChatGPT by itself is not very fault tolerant. And, it could itself be subjected to a DDoS attack. And it could probably go down, right? So I'm not recommending you all try that, but at least from testing that has been done in the industry, it has had this known susceptibility to DDoS attacks. So, if you put this into some kind of a mission critical system and it get DDoSed, well, that system could go down and your mission critical system may be subject to risk, right? So you got to be aware of that, and you have to figure out that your LLMs that you're standing up or under the hood, if they're making calls to OpenAI or otherwise, that they are fault tolerant. So you might want to do that. One thing is, the other, to give you some basic rudimentary protection against DDoS attacks, you might want to host these systems behind a WAF if you are exposing it publicly through a public interface or over the internet. Similarly, you might want to start implementing dynamic traffic scrubbing capabilities at the internet edge so that you can be protected from DDoS attacks. Also, because of the ransomware risk, traditional ransomware controls for detection ransomware, protecting from ransomware apply, like EDR. So you'll have to make sure that you have a good, decent EDR capability available on your endpoints. And last but not the least, a simple poor man's antidote to ransomware is to get ransomware kill switches deployed, so that if ransomware were to be somehow sneak into your ecosystem, that you could actually kill switches could be activated either on the ransomware itself or various paradigms of kill switches that exist. I'm not going to get into how the kill switch works, but those are something that you might want to proactively deploy as the risk of ransomware is increasing, especially with the increased usage of Gen AI to generate them. Let's get further into regulatory compliance issues and privacy violations. So as we have already discussed, right? So the regulators are not going to give us a pass just because we use the Gen AI tool to generate some stuff, right? And it caused a privacy violation. For example, even within the firm, if the Gen AI capability that you may have, like for example, Copilot, it gets into some kind of an HR tenant and shares data, overshares data with the rest of the firm or with a group of people that they are not supposed to, that's a privacy violation, right? There are also other various risks that are there, like the PCI violations, right? Or obviously with GDPR or CCPA violations, right? So I think that as this automated capability is out there that is generating responses and has access to various sources of data, we've got to be worried about compliance, or any kind of violation of any of the compliance that we have to kind of sort of, any of the regulations we have to be compliant with. So we've got to make sure that happens. Also, if these tools are not properly protected or secured, right, then their inappropriate use of NPI or PII data can also cause trust violations, which can eventually lead to reputational risk for the firm, right? So I think these are some of the risks that exist that we got to be worried about, right? And like non-compliance can lead to fines, enforcement actions, reputational risk, and so many other things that can happen, right? So we've got to make sure that we have this understood, right? And there is, lots of interesting capabilities are being developed in the industry. There is the regulatory compliance enforcement engines that actually can be an intermediary between your LLM and the response engine. Like for example, between the OpenAI engine to the actual response before it comes to a user, you can have a sanitization layer in the middle that can try to enforce some regulatory compliance. You can look that up as to like who's doing that, but there are a few firms that are actually building those. And similarly, there are privacy enforcement engines and data sanitizers also that are being made available. You can also consider writing one on for yourself with your existing DLP capabilities or privacy enforcement capabilities at the browser layer, or between the language model and the response, right? So you could probably write some shell layers in the middle that can maybe start protecting you or alerting or notifying you of any violations. So this is an area that is of serious concern that we should all actively work together to mitigate this risk. The next one is there's something called hallucinations, right? So hallucination is a phenomena that exists between LLMs, where they will give you they will respond with information that is totally and completely inaccurate, right? And that is a phenomena that actually exists with these tools. But now that phenomena or likewise phenomena can also be simulated with attacks, with poisoning, right? To actually create fake information, because if you train it with fake information, it'll respond with fake information, right? So this is dangerous. And it could create information and it'll reply with a lot of confidence, right? And in various forms, with text and audio and video, right? So the creation of a natural occurrence of hallucination, or creation of fake information by simulating hallucinations is very dangerous, right? And it can, for example, be used to lead you to fake sites or malicious sites, to attack various types of attacks like drive-by download attacks and so on and so forth. So I think that the way this can be managed is, you have to create alternative sources for information verification. So before a response is being provided, it needs to be verified from an alternate source of truth to verify that, okay, this information, before you give a response, that is it indeed accurate or is it in the vicinity of being accurate, right? So there is some work that has happened in the industry that is going on. And I think you all should be aware of this, that this is a risk that needs to be dealt with. Especially in certain business domains, this information is a lot more prevalent, this type of behavior, than some other ones, but something that we have to think about. The other one is, social engineering and phishing attacks. So they have, obviously, as these LLMs can generate fake identities, fake email domains very, very quickly using DJAs. They can also craft very convincing looking phishing emails, right? Because see, if the phishing email is of the past, and you can tell just by looking at it, hey, this looks a little off, right? So, but now these tools can actually generate very real lookalike, either lookalike domains or emails themselves with images. And, so the success rate of phishing attacks is increasing with data, with emails that may have been generated by these, with the help of these tools. So I think that, again, advanced and targeted attack prevention capabilities at the email domain needs to be done for inbound email. A lot more focus needs to be put on threat intel as to like who's creating fake identities, where are these fake email domains. Having that intel in advance is helpful, so that for security folks, so that you can protect or block those domains. And also malicious DGA detection and blocking capabilities need to be implemented across the board if you already don't have that, right? And last but not the least is that if we can enable DMARC for our emails, that actually reduces the threat vector as well. Because if this is indeed a fake email coming from a malicious source, it's more than likely will fail DMARC compliance. And DMARC under the hood is obviously provided through DNS, capability, but with your DKIM and your SPF records. So you can look that up and Google that, and you can learn more about what DMARC is. So with that, next one is impersonation. So, like they can actually use adversarial AI technology like deepfakes to defeat biometric authenticators, right? So biometric authenticators, for example, use your fingerprints or your face. And tools like ChatGPT can help the creation of very sophisticated deepfakes to defeat these authentication techniques, right? So very dangerous, and something that obviously we have to protect ourselves against. So there is capabilities available to detect and block deepfakes, or with high probability can predict if there is a deepfake in progress, depending upon the use case of where the authentication is occurring. And what, is it like, for example, a mobile device? Is it an application layer? If it's something else, right? So there are capabilities that they are still in the infancy, but there is some work going on to how to detect and block deepfakes. The other thing is that there is data poisoning that can go on. So the problem is that these engines, the LLMs need a lot of data to train on, right? And if the cyber attackers can actually poison the data sets that are used to create the Gen AI responses, bad things can happen. Right, so they can actually create lots of problems with real-time critical systems if they are in the workflow. If these Gen AIs get into workflows for critical mission systems, hospitals, and otherwise, and if the data that they have been trained with, the mothership, for example, gets poisoned, it's just output is completely undefined, right? So what we have to do is to make sure that training data sets is properly protected using encryption and segmentation. And then we air gap the training data that has been specifically been used for Gen AI. If you are using a public source of training data versus private source, depending on how your ecosystem is. So especially data protection is extremely important because of data poisoning attacks and risks from those attacks. The other problem with these models is that when they give you a response, there is no real good way to actually figure out if the response is actually accurate or not. Right? How are you going to do that? So the reality is that we have to build in the capability so that we can verify with some way, shape, or form that the information that we are receiving from these large learning models is indeed accurate, right? So I think that so that's one risk. The other risk, obviously, is that misconfigurations, that can happen because of generated configurations from Gen AI can be a big problem. So, like for example, usual security hygiene things like infrastructure as code, platform as code, and otherwise can definitely help, as well as using SAST and DAST and software composition analysis, also known as SCA. So there's a few other things that I have that I'm going to stop talking about because I want to leave 5 minutes for Q&A. But the other things are like inherent biases can be developed by Gen AIs. We got to protect against that. And then the takeaways are that we got to make sure that the security controls have been implemented before so that we can maintain the confidentiality integrity of our data while we enable these capabilities and systems. We should also develop the IOCs and TTPs to block the misuse of these systems. And then we've got to make sure that these controls we're talking about are seamlessly integrated into the design and development of these systems, right? So that this is not after the the release patchwork. This needs to be done as these systems are being rolled out, as the use cases that they are being rolled out for, and we test the security controls so that these the risks from them cannot be exploited. So with that, as you say, I went really fast because there was a lot of material here. But if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So let me get back into the Zoom session. And let me see if there are any questions. Okay, so I see some. So the first question is generative AI essential to implement in current business models? I feel that it actually, can optimize our existing business processes. It can speed up the existing business processes. It can aid them. So if your competition is using them and getting 10 to 20% improvement in productivity, I feel that definitely, you have to consider using them as well. Keep the risks in mind though, right? Secondly, is how do I evaluate current business problems to see if it's a good fit for Gen AI? I think that really depends upon the domain that you work in. So definitely, you could look at what is your business processes. If you have a lot of manual components, right, that can be automated. If you, for example, if you have been a good use case for chatbots in the past, you probably will be a good use case for Gen AI as well. So it all depends upon your business model, but I think that many business models that we have can actually benefit from Gen AI usage. Question three is, are there any litigation issues one needs to be aware of? Yes, I talked about litigation. So there is the litigation could be with IP violations, right? That is a problem, or violation, just a violation of basic licensing. Even, like for example, open source licensing has some constraints as well, right? So you've got to be worried about that, and that's why SCA tools can help you. The next question is, what is the best way to verify AI results that defend against litigation? SCA, and software composition analysis. At least in the software world, the images that it may be generating that you may start using is a separate animal. For that, you have to go to another source of truth to verify that any image that you are using is not going to cause you some kind of a violation. So there are sources for that information as well. Definitely, that information is being made available. How does my company evaluate Gen AI implementation initiatives? I think the best way to do is to start doing POCs with, for example, the lowest hanging fruit is with Copilot in the Microsoft world. And for those that may not know, Microsoft Bing for Enterprise, which is their browser, also has an integration with LLM. And actually, it is a slightly lightweight version of that, but I think that is actually pretty decent for you to experiment with. And it would not get access into your Microsoft tenant. So something for you to consider. What's the next question? Are there any valid reasons not to implement Gen AI? I think that it depends upon the business that you are in, but if you have access to a lot of PII and PI, right, you have a lot of sensitive data. For example, if you have HIPAA that applies to you, right, or if you have PCI compliance, and you don't have good controls, if you don't have good categorization of your data, if you don't have privileges which are based on least privilege, like your user access, then that could be something that you might want to fix before you start diving into Gen AI, because it may get access to all these ecosystems and may cause oversharing of that data. Or you don't want the large language model to learn your proprietary business logic and then share it outwards with your competitor, for example. So you have to make sure that the so-called queries that go into this are not learned or stored, and the learning of the model is independent from your actual source data. You got to think about that. So I think that these are well published. If you start looking into it, you can figure out what the best practices for its usage are. I think I tried to answer all the questions. Any other additional questions anybody has? I wanted to stay in time. It's 1:29 Eastern time. I think I've answered all the questions, but we can definitely follow up through email or otherwise if somebody wants to do a follow-on. But I thank you all for listening in, and at least giving me an opportunity to share this information with you. I went really, really, really fast, as you all may have observed. But I think that at least it gives you an idea that this is good capabilities and technology that is being rolled out worldwide. And we've got to start adopting it, but we got to figure out the risks, and we have to figure out how to mitigate or remediate those risks. So I look forward to talking to you all in a future session like this. Thank you so much again for giving me the opportunity to present to you. Have a good day.
And thank you again, Raj, for such an incredible keynote. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. We would also like to thank Adobe for partnering with us today for this event. This officially concludes the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Have a great rest of your day.